mix of notable clips, headlines, and references being shared across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. Qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay informed. All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here. From the Q Research Boards, January 22, 2026, President Trump has launched the new Board of Peace during the World Economic Forum in Davos. More than 20 nations immediately signed on, giving the new body international weight. The board aims to oversee reconstruction, security, and diplomacy in conflict zones, starting with Gaza. Supporters say it could become more effective than the United Nations at resolving wars due to direct participation from world leaders instead of career bureaucrats. 8 major Muslim-majority nations, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Qatar, and the UAE have signed onto the Board of Peace. Their involvement gives the framework regional legitimacy and places responsibility on Arab governments to shape Gaza's future. Observers note the move isolates radical elements and shifts power away from traditional NGO structures towards state leadership. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted an invitation to sit on the Supreme Board of Peace. Israel's participation links the new framework directly to Gaza's security and reconstruction. Analysts believe this could replace failed United Nations models and create a trilateral approach involving Israel, the United States, and key Arab governments for long-term stabilization. President Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Davos to discuss a diplomatic end to the Ukraine war. The United States is linking negotiations to European energy policy and Arctic development. Trump emphasized that a lasting settlement will require Europe to accept new security and energy realities instead of relying on old NATO assumptions. During his Davos address, President Trump stated that the West cannot mass import foreign cultures that have historically failed to build successful societies. He tied unchecked migration to crime, social disorder, and cultural fragmentation in both Europe and the United States. Supporters say he highlighted an issue most leaders avoid. Critics disagree but offer no policy alternative. At Davos, President Trump again stated that the 2020 election was rigged and predicted that individuals responsible for illegal conduct would be prosecuted. While legal debates continue, Trump has succeeded in keeping election integrity as a central national issue. This positions Republicans to run on security reforms, voter ID, and ballot transparency in 2026 and 2028. President Trump warned that Hamas must disarm or it will be blown away very quickly. He said the group had agreed to initial terms involving weapons surrender and monitoring. If verified, it would mark the first time Hamas has been placed under direct multinational enforcement instead of relying on weak UN mechanisms. The U.S. Treasury introduced the economic slogan, "Grow, baby, grow," in Davos. The administration is pushing pro-energy, pro-industry policies and encouraging allies to abandon anti-growth green austerity programs. The messaging reflects a shift from climate ideology toward industrial capacity, energy abundance, and global competitiveness. Australia has extended the life of its largest coal power plant through 2029. Officials said wind and solar are unable to meet national baseline demand without risk of major blackouts. The move highlights a global trend. Nations lecturing on green policy are quietly returning to reliable fossil power to keep grids stable and prices affordable. The European Union has frozen ratification of the Mercosur Free Trade Pact after widespread farmer protests across France and Germany. Farmers say the agreement would destroy domestic agriculture by flooding Europe with cheap imports. Their revolt reflects broader discontent with globalist policy agendas that ignore national economic realities. Bill and Hillary Clinton have been hit with bipartisan contempt resolutions in the House Oversight Committee. Lawmakers say the Clintons failed to comply with document and testimony requirements. Republicans argue this proves accountability is no longer reserved for small players. Democrats claim it is political, but the fact remains that Congress is now willing to challenge the most protected figures in modern U.S. politics. Ghislaine Maxwell will testify before the House Oversight Committee in the coming weeks. Members intend to question her about associates, intelligence links, and how Epstein's network operated for decades in plain sight. For many Americans, this could be the first time someone tied directly to the scandal is forced to speak publicly without redaction or media filters. A Jewish federal judge and Obama appointee, Engelmeyer, has delayed the release of remaining Epstein files despite requirements for transparency. Victims, watchdogs, and lawmakers say this pattern protects powerful individuals instead of the public. The push for sunlight continues even as the court system appears reluctant to expose names, networks, and connections that have been shielded for years. Judicial Watch is suing the Department of Justice for unredacted documents related to the Durham investigation. The group argues the government has repeatedly stalled transparency on FBI misconduct during the 2016-2020 period. If these records are released without blackouts, the public could finally see the internal communications that shaped modern political espionage operations. Reports indicate Biden's FBI paid anti-Trump Sedition Hunter activists as informants during January 6th investigations. Supporters of the investigation say this increased evidence collection, while critics argue it weaponized citizen surveillance for political targeting. The practice raises new questions about federal partnerships with partisan online networks. The CIA released messaging stating, "around the world and around the clock," emphasizing continuous global operations. This aligns with a broader shift in U.S. intelligence posture from counterterrorism toward great power competition. The agency appears to be signaling strength and readiness at a time when geopolitical pressure is rising in Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Jack Smith is expected to testify publicly, with some observers calling it a panic-driven addition by the Justice Department. Public hearings will put prosecutors under direct questioning instead of controlling cases through indictments alone. This could expose legal and political coordination normally kept behind courtroom walls. President Trump stated that prosecutions are coming over the rigged 2020 election. He continues to frame election integrity as a national security issue instead of a partisan dispute. This positioning forces the debate into the constitutional domain, where evidence, chain of custody, and foreign interference become the centerpieces rather than media talking points. A media study found networks produced 93% negative coverage of ICE. Supporters of immigration enforcement say the media environment undermines law enforcement and emboldens criminal organizations. The disconnect between federal raids and media narratives has created a frontline information war between border agents and newsrooms. FBI arrests surged nearly 200% in 2025, signaling a major shift in federal law enforcement priorities. Cases include fentanyl trafficking, cybercrime, child exploitation, and cartel operations. The increase suggests that latent criminal networks were left unchecked under previous administrations and are now being aggressively targeted. The FCC is moving to enforce equal time rules that could affect partisan programming on major networks. Stations may be required to offer political balance or surrender valuable airtime during election cycles. Broadcasters have relied on commentary loopholes for years. This rule change could close that gap and force a more level information landscape. The Pentagon has instructed military police units in North Carolina to prepare for deployment to Minneapolis. Possible triggers include unrest related to federal immigration enforcement or civil breakdown. This signals that the administration is ready to use the National Guard and active units to restore order if local governments fail to control their jurisdictions. U.S. naval forces seized the sanctioned tanker Sedition, marking the 7th maritime interdiction linked to Venezuelan oil networks. These operations demonstrate that American naval power still controls the flow of illegal energy shipments across the hemisphere. Maritime interdiction is becoming a preferred tool over large-scale ground invasions. The United States has deployed THAAD and Patriot missile systems to Jordan, Israel, the UAE, and Oman. This buildup forms a protective shield against Iranian ballistic capabilities. If a strike occurs, U.S. forces will have both defensive and offensive options available within minutes, signaling strategic readiness instead of retreat. President Trump stated that the U.S. has ordered an additional 25 B-2 stealth bombers. Long-range stealth capabilities are essential for power projection against peer adversaries such as China or Russia. The expansion suggests that the administration sees world politics shifting toward deterrence, backed by overwhelming air superiority. The capture of Nicolas Maduro, combined with maritime oil interdictions, represents a dual-track campaign against criminalized state structures. Instead of relying on sanctions alone, the United States is now using precision operations to cut revenue pipelines and remove top leadership. This represents a new strategy for collapsing hostile regimes without invasion. New military programs are training drone operators to meet future warfare demands. Drones are now central to reconnaissance, logistics, targeting, and asymmetric engagements. The Pentagon believes that whoever masters drone warfare will hold an enormous strategic edge in the next decade. CENTCOM confirmed the transfer of ISIS detainees to Iraq for continued detention. Moving detainees across borders requires high-level cooperation and intelligence validation. This reinforces that the U.S. military remains deeply engaged in counter-terror operations, even as public attention shifts to great power conflicts. European leaders are advancing an anti-coercion trade response to President Trump's tariff policies, calling it a trade bazooka. The tool is designed to retaliate against U.S. economic pressure. Trump dismisses complaints and argues Europe must rebuild manufacturing instead of relying on America's defense and China's factories. Russian President Vladimir Putin has praised Trump's Arctic and Greenland strategy as a geopolitical masterstroke. Moscow sees Arctic development as a major future battleground over trade routes, mining rights, and energy exports. Putin's reaction signals that Europe is the side being squeezed, while Washington and Moscow maneuver over long-term strategic advantages.
At shop.isitwaya.com, everything you buy supports Qnotables, the place where people talk freely no matter what. Check out our Qn honey pot, a jar of yummy honey that's as strong as your voice. Put it on toast or in tea. It's not just honey, it's freedom in every bite. Then there's Qn butter, a smooth handmade skin cream that makes you feel good while you fight for what's right. Awesome wood and pieces for display only. Hang them up or set them out. They're for showing off Qn's tough spirit. Want to help even more? Get a proto membership. So go to shop.isitwaya.com now and grab some goodies. Help Qnotables keep free speech alive, and let's keep the ideas flowing loud and free.
All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here.
From the Q Research Board's January 22, 2026. President Trump announced a framework covering Greenland and the broader Arctic region during talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. In exchange, Trump paused incoming tariffs that were set to hit Europe. The agreement ties Arctic access, energy routes, and rare earth mining into a single U.S.-led strategy for the first time. President Trump clarified he will not use military force or economic punishment to obtain Greenland. Instead, negotiations involve basing rights, infrastructure, and shared sovereignty agreements. The approach resembles U.S.-controlled territories like Guam, giving America a strategic Arctic platform without resorting to conquest. Financial markets rallied following Trump's Arctic and Greenland announcements, with analysts praising his negotiation tactics. Investors see new opportunities in shipping, mining, and energy, especially as Arctic sea lanes become navigable. Trump's strategy aligns military, economic, and industrial policy into a single long-term plan, reducing Western dependence on China. Part of the Davos Conference Center was evacuated after a fire caused heavy smoke and forced guests outside. While authorities handled the situation quickly, the symbolism was pointed. A gathering of global elites focused on climate debates was interrupted by an unexpected structural emergency. Trump had already departed Davos before the incident. U.S. forces seized the Venezuelan-linked tanker Sajida in the Caribbean, marking the seventh such interdiction. The Trump administration is enforcing strict sanctions against regimes tied to illegal oil shipments. Naval operations show that American sea power remains decisive when Washington is willing to use it. The Sajida seizure is part of a larger campaign that included the capture of former Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro. The dual strategy of leadership removal and maritime interdiction appears aimed at breaking cartel-style oil networks and stabilizing Venezuela under new political arrangements. 37 Mexican nationals wanted for serious crimes, including cartel leadership and terrorism offenses, have been transferred to the United States. The move shows deeper cooperation between Washington and Mexico on cross-border crime, driven by pressure to disrupt fentanyl pipelines and human trafficking routes. European police have dismantled 24 industrial-scale synthetic drug labs, disrupting major MDMA and meth production networks. Authorities estimate that hundreds of tons of finished product may have been removed from circulation. The crackdown demonstrates that Europe is now a major producer, not just a consumer, of synthetic narcotics. Mexico's government defended its decision to transfer cartel suspects to U.S. custody, saying it was necessary to prevent incarcerated criminals from continuing to run operations. Despite internal criticism, Mexican officials admit that corruption and weak prisons make cross-border cooperation unavoidable. Representative Delia Ramirez has introduced the Melt ICE Act, which would defund Immigration and Customs Enforcement and eventually dissolve the agency. The proposal represents the most radical immigration agenda in Congress and stands in direct opposition to Trump's plans to expand ICE operations nationwide. Homeland Security has launched Operation Catch of the Day in Maine, with ICE arresting roughly 50 individuals on the first day. Officials say many of those targeted have serious criminal convictions. The operation highlights the contrast between federal enforcement and local sanctuary policies. ICE operations in Minneapolis have reignited debate after protests broke out following an agent-involved shooting. The case has intensified scrutiny of sanctuary city policies and raised questions about the safety of federal officers operating in hostile jurisdictions. Europe's farmers continue to blockade roads, ports, and distribution hubs in protest of high fuel costs, climate mandates, and foreign trade agreements. Their movement has gained widespread public support, forcing European governments to reconsider agricultural and environmental policies. Goldman Sachs is reportedly considering removing a top executive following the emergence of communications with Jeffrey Epstein. The situation underscores the financial world's vulnerability to the Epstein scandal and may trigger wider internal reviews across major institutions. President Trump has stated that the Hamas disarmament agreement will be tested within weeks. If Hamas refuses to comply, Trump says military force will remove the organization's remaining capabilities. This marks the first multinational enforcement threat against Hamas in decades. Russian officials say that Trump's Greenland and Arctic initiatives have reshaped geopolitical calculations. With China also pushing into the Arctic, the United States and Russia may find overlapping interests against European and Chinese competition. European officials have admitted that renewable energy programs failed to prevent price spikes and shortages in 2023 and 2024. Several EU governments are now quietly investing in coal, nuclear, and natural gas to stabilize their grids. The shift validates concerns Trump leaders in Davos to promote U.S. domestic manufacturing, Arctic development, and energy independence. Corporate leaders said the United States is becoming the most attractive country for industrial investment due to cheap energy and low taxes.
Every voice matters. The power of free speech is more important than ever. Imagine a place where you can share your thoughts freely, explore new ideas, and engage in meaningful conversations anonymously. With online anonymity, you can express yourself without fear of judgment. It's about freedom, creativity, and connection. Join the conversation that matters. Embrace your voice. Celebrate your freedom. Visit 8kun.top today. That's 8kun.top.
That's all for now. Stay alert, stay informed, and never hand your thinking over to anyone on a screen, including me. God bless you, God bless our troops, and God bless the United